Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind our cozy bedrooms, electric lights, and midnight snacks to take a sudden, jarring tumble straight into the grime and grind of medieval life. One moment you're scrolling on your phone, and the next, you're blinking under a murky, overcast sky, surrounded by the pungent scent of wet earth, livestock, and what might generously be called a questionable stew. Your sneakers are gone. So are your jeans. You're barefoot, wrapped in a shapeless sackcloth tunic that smells like it skipped several centuries of laundry. Around you, everything is brown: the mud, the huts, the cows, the bread, if you can even call it that. You hear the distant clang of metal on metal, the rhythmic thud of hooves, and a child shrieking either in play or terror. Hard to tell. Welcome to the 14th century. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love seeing where my night owls and time travelers are listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You regain consciousness in what might generously be called a village square. But don't picture anything quaint or fairy tale-like. It's more of an uneven patch of dirt, slick with animal waste and trampled hay, with chickens darting under carts and a suspiciously smug pig chewing something that looks like a boot. Possibly yours. You sit up, heart thudding. Cold wind slices through your sackcloth tunic, and your legs are already numb. The sky hangs low and gray. And the smell? Oh, the smell. It's like someone brewed a soup of manure, wet fur, smoke, and despair. A passerby in a ragged coif eyes you, mutters something in what might be Middle English, and keeps walking. No one's surprised to see you here. Apparently, strangers showing up covered in mud isn't even interesting anymore. Your first steps are wobbly. Your muscles ache in strange places, and you're immediately reminded that shoes are not optional when the roads are more puddle than path. You reach out to a fence post for balance and discover it's slick with something organic, possibly chicken-based. No time to guess. The first real challenge hits fast. You have no idea where or when you are. But let's be honest, the iPhone you instinctively reach for is missing, and even if it were here, there's no charger, no power, no signal, no anything. A group of peasants nearby are arguing over a sheep that refuses to move. The louder man pokes it with a stick while the other tries to pull it forward by the neck. You're too cold and too overwhelmed to laugh, but your brain stores it as a moment of levity. Something to treasure later, when you're not worrying about typhoid or wolves. Suddenly, a bell rings. Not an alert, just a village bell, signaling midday, or maybe the Angelus, or possibly just that someone died. Again, you glance around for clues, but no one seems panicked. Death is sort of expected here. Regular, like rain or fleas. As you shuffle past a hut with smoke curling from the roof hole, chimneys haven't quite caught on yet. You begin to realize the architecture is less historic charm and more rotting timber held together by mud and prayers. Inside, you hear coughing. Deep, rattly, medieval coughing. The kind that sounds like it could be contagious even through time. You try to speak. Just a simple hello, but your voice comes out croaky. Dry throat. No water. You haven't eaten, and your stomach is starting to protest. But food, as you'll soon discover, isn't something you can just go out and get. There's no corner shop, no bakery. Even if there were, you don't have coin or the local dialect to barter with. You're functionally useless here. A mute, barefoot alien. And then, it happens, you step in it. It doesn't matter what it is. Your foot squelches deep into a warm, fragrant heap of something profoundly not mud, and for one suspended second you think about your shower back home. Your clean socks, your bath mat, and then you think there is no soap here. There is no concept of germ theory. You're just going to walk around with whatever that was on your foot until it naturally rots off. You limp to the nearest bench-like thing, a half-rotted log, and collapse. Around you, life buzzes in its medieval monotone. Children throw rocks, adults argue about grain, someone yells in pain from a nearby hovel. A rooster hops on your knee, pecks once, and hops away like this is just another Tuesday. And it is, you begin to take stock. What do you have? Nothing. What do you know? Almost nothing that's useful here. Your skills, social media, microwaving frozen burritos, quoting TV shows are worth less than nothing. No one here needs a marketing strategist. They need someone who can survive on barley porridge and keep rats out of the grain sacks. Your teeth chatter. The wind's picking up. You realize you don't even know how people in this time stay warm. And that's when you spot the fire. A group of villagers huddled around a flickering pit outside a hut. You approach hesitantly, and they glance at you. You raise a hand, wave. One nods. The others ignore you. Apparently, you're either too weird to care about or too pathetic to pose a threat. You edge closer to the fire. The warmth is immediate and heavenly. You nearly cry, but you hold it together. Just barely. One man, wrapped in what might once have been a blanket, mumbles something and tosses a chunk of something unidentifiable into a bowl. He eats with his fingers. You're not offered any, and you realize this is going to be a very, very long day. You don't yet know how to ask for help. You don't even know the words. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant spoke a stable version of English or more of a local dialect soup. Either way, you don't speak this, and they don't care. Time passes slowly. The sky darkens slightly, though it's only early afternoon. You shiver, trying to make yourself smaller. One of the children throws something at you, some kind of desiccated fruit. It hits your shoulder, then bounces to the ground. You debate whether to eat it. That's where your standards are now. You decide, no, not yet, maybe later. You lie back against the log and stare up at the sky. Somewhere far away, someone plays a single mournful note on a flute. It's probably not meant to be ominous, but it is. Everything here is, and you're just beginning. You've been sitting by the fire log for who knows how long. The villagers mostly ignore you, unless they're shooting sideways glances to make sure you're not about to steal something or explode. Your stomach growls again, this time louder, angry, rebellious. A woman in a woolen hood ladles something from a blackened pot into a wooden bowl. Steam rises and curls. The smell reaches you, sour, smoky, and faintly cabbagey. Could be stew. Could be water that cabbage once sat near. Either way you want it. She sees you staring. You try a hopeful smile. She blinks slowly, then turns and walks away with the bowl. Right? You're not one of them. Not yet. Maybe never. Food. It's now the mission. You need it or you'll collapse. But you have a problem. You don't have a penny to your name. And even if you did, medieval money isn't exactly something your Apple Pay can simulate. Historians still argue whether barter or coin was more common in rural peasant economies, especially during famine years. Either way, you're screwed. You venture toward what you think might be a marketplace. It's really just a wider street with some wooden stalls, some collapsed, others leaning like they've given up. A boy sells onions from cart. They're tiny, dirt-caked, and suspiciously soft-looking. You motion to one. He scowls, holds up 3 fingers. You mimic reaching into a pocket and come up empty. He spits near your shoe and turns his back. A group of women are kneeling on the ground, scrubbing leaks with what might be rainwater. You squat nearby, try not to look desperate. You do. They whisper. You catch only one word clearly: mad. It might be the only accurate word anyone has said about you today. You stumble upon an old man slicing bread. It looks like it's made from gravel and regret. The crust is rock hard, the interior a pale gray. He's selling it in chunks. No butter. No jam. No hope. Your stomach twists in on itself. At this point, you'd eat a week-old Pop-Tart with moss on it. But even the old man doesn't acknowledge you. A customer pays in what looks like copper. You consider begging. Just drop to your knees and sob. But you don't know the words. So instead, you linger, like a hungry ghost, hoping someone pities you. Eventually, someone does. A hunched woman with a generous face and flour smudges on her cheeks comes out of a doorway. She's carrying a tray of half-burned oatcakes, flat, scorched, dense as bricks. She sees you wobbling on your feet, muttering to yourself, and sighs the way people do when they're about to do something they'll regret. She holds out a single cake. You grab it. Not too fast. You don't want to scare her, but with an urgency your stomach appreciates. It tastes like ashes and straw. You chew anyway. Swallow hard. Immediately regret it, but also cherish it like it's a gourmet meal. You mutter thanks. She says something in return. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a curse. She vanishes back into her dark little doorway. Congratulations. You've eaten, except it's not over. Your body, in its infinite wisdom, reminds you that digestion is a process, and one that tends to, encourage other processes. Your stomach rumbles again, this time with ominous intention. You need a bathroom. Huh, good one. There are no bathrooms. That word doesn't even exist yet. There are chamber pots, public pits, rivers, and corners that smell like secrets and shame. You look around. No signs. No doors with gender symbols. Just buildings and animal pens. You limp toward what might be an outhouse, only to find it's already in use by a goat. And the goat seems annoyed. In desperation, you follow your nose away from food toward filth, which, let's be honest, isn't a long walk. The entire village smells like compost and bad decisions. Behind a barn, you find it, a trench filled with, well, let's just call it evidence of life. The stench hits you like a medieval punch to the sinuses. You gag, hard, but you can't afford to be squeamish now. You squat, awkwardly, holding your tunic away from danger. The cold wind kisses your rear with merciless enthusiasm. Everything about this is humiliating and very, very public. A chicken watches. Judgingly, you finish as quickly as possible, grab a handful of leaves. What kind? Who knows? Your medieval botany skills are non-existent, and stumble away, vowing to emotionally repress this memory forever. Now you're hungry again, also nauseous, also possibly poisoned by whatever was in that oatcake. You sit down near a fence. The fence promptly collapses. You roll off it and lie in the mud. You don't even care anymore. A small girl approaches. She offers you something in her tiny hand. A dried figure. Possibly. You take it. You stopped asking questions. You nod in thanks. She doesn't respond. Just skips away. One shoe, one sock, and humming what sounds suspiciously like an ominous church tune. This, right here, is the pace of eating in the Middle Ages. Not meals, not snacks, just constant scrounging, foraging, accepting, hoping. A mainstream historical fact? Most peasants consume 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day, but for mostly bread, pottage, and ale. You're far below that, and your body knows it. You wander again, aimless. A woman waves you over. She's stirring something in a cauldron. Thick, brownish. Could be stew. Could be will die. You hope it's stew. She offers you a ladleful. It's tepid, slimy, has a bit of something floating in it. Meat? Mushroom? You sip. It's not bad. You nod in thanks. She says something. You think it's friendly. Then she sneezes into the pot. You stop sipping. Behind her hut, you see a drying rack. Herbs hang from strings. Parsley, fennel, maybe sage. A glimpse of green in a world of brown. You reach to sniff one. A man barks at you. He's holding a rake like a weapon. You back away. Apparently, Touching herbs uninvited is frowned upon. You mumble an apology. He points toward the woods. Are you being told to leave? Or is that just where they bury troublemakers? You walk away slowly, chewing the inside of your cheek, which is now one of your few reliable food sources. Eventually, you find a spot near a tree that isn't surrounded by pigs or yelling. You sit. You think. You wonder how long a human can last on boiled oats and pride. You won't die today. Probably. But already, you miss the sound of a refrigerator opening, the click of a microwave door, the bright, pixelated comfort of a fast food menu glowing at 2 a.m. Here, food is hard. Hunger is normal. And everything tastes like ash or onions. If it doesn't kill you, it'll repeat on you like a bad memory. And tomorrow, you'll be expected to work for it. You wake to the rhythmic clang of a bell. Not a charming church bell. Not something out of a postcard. It's a dull metallic knell that seems to come from somewhere in your bones. You don't remember falling asleep. One moment you were shivering under a tree, your stomach softly murmuring protest, and the next dawn. The sky is a faint smear of pink over dirty rooftops. Cocks are crowing. People are already moving, and you're expected to get up and do things. Today is work day, which, to be fair, is every day. There are no weekends in medieval times. No sick days. No personal time. No, I'm just not feeling it today. You're up with the sun, and you work until the sun decides you've suffered enough. Then you collapse into a pile of straw and pray you're not covered in fleas. Spoiler, you are. A boy passes you with a yoke over his shoulders, 2 buckets sloshing with what might be water. His boots are made of stiff leather, worn to a shiny, miserable shine. He gives you a look that says, "Get moving, outsider," and disappears into the rising fog. You force yourself up. Every muscle protests like you've completed a boot camp taught by an angry horse. Your back aches. Your calves feel bruised. Your hands are soft, too soft. You haven't even done anything yet, and still you feel like someone's been working you over with a broomstick. You follow the others. Instinctively, there's a small herd forming. Men, women, even children, trudging through the village toward the fields. Some carry crude tools, sickles, rakes, shovels with splintering handles. You have nothing, not even gloves. Just that tunic and your questionable optimism. The air smells like dew and cow. A faint mist clings to the grass. It's pretty, until you remember that everything here is wet, cold, and hostile to comfort, including the ground. You're assigned, while voluntold, to join a group clearing a patch of scrubland. Someone hands you a short-handled hoe. It's heavy, splintery. The blade is more rust than metal. You look at it like it might bite you. It might. A man shouts something. Everyone begins digging. So you do too. The ground is hard, packed with centuries of hoof prints and poor decisions. Every swing of the hoe sends shock waves up your arms. Your soft hands develop blisters within minutes. Your shoulders burn. Your breath comes out in short gasps. And you're going so much slower than everyone else. An old woman with wiry arms and no teeth is clearing 2 rows to your 1. A boy no older than 10 works beside you, humming and sweating like it's the most natural thing in the world. You want to sit, but sitting means attention. And attention here is dangerous. Because here's the thing, you're expected to contribute. You eat, you work. Even if it's barely edible cabbage water, you work for it. That's the unspoken contract of survival. A mainstream historical fact? The average medieval peasant worked dawn to dusk, especially during planting and harvest seasons, often 6 days a week, with Sunday being more for church than rest. You're barely 30 minutes in, and your lower back feels like someone slipped a gremlin onto your spine. And just when you think it can't get worse, it does. It starts to rain. Not a soft sprinkle. A slow, soaking, seeping kind of rain that finds every opening in your clothes and every crevice in your soul. There's no shelter. No, let's call it day. You work through it. Because you have to. Because no one cares that your tunic is now clinging to your skin like a soggy tortilla. You keep swinging. Keep digging. Until your hands look less like hands and more like raw hamburger. Then, someone blows a horn. Lunch? Kind of. People start trudging back toward the village. Not cheerfully, more like a funeral procession. You follow them, feeling every step in your knees. Near the huts, smoke curls again from cooking fires. You're handed a bowl. It's pottage today. Again, you don't ask what's in it. You eat. The warmth spreads through your chest. Briefly, it's thick, gritty, possibly turnips or barley or both. Someone drops a hunk of dark bread into your lap. It's hard enough to chip a tooth, but you bite anyway. Chew, swallow, repeat. Then, back to work, because the sun still stands high and the field is still waiting. You sigh and return, muscles trembling, skin chafing, and a strange burn starting in your lower lip. Wait, are you sunburnt? Already? Historians still argue whether medieval peasants suffered long-term malnutrition more from lack of food or lack of nutrients in their diet. Either way, your body is screaming for a multivitamin. A quirky tidbit, medieval people sometimes rubbed goose fat on their hands to prevent blisters. You, unfortunately, are fresh out of geese. You return to the same field, pick up the same hoe, and keep swinging. It's mindless, and that's the point. This is survival by repetition. You don't think. You dig. Hours pass, maybe days. Time is a flat circle. You stop caring. Finally, at some unspoken signal, the work stops. Tools are down. Someone says a prayer, maybe to thank the sky, maybe to curse it. You limp back to the village, feet blistered and raw. A girl offers you water. It's lukewarm, metallic, possibly from the same bucket that washed feet earlier. You drink it anyway. Your body feels like it's held together with string and spite. Your tunic is stiff with sweat. Your hands are shredded. And guess what? Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You crawl into the barn where you slept last night. Curl up in a corner that's only moderately rat-infested. A piece of straw stabs your ear. You don't care. You fall asleep almost instantly, muscles twitching in protest. And as sleep takes you, one last thought drifts across your mind. You were not built for this. Morning doesn't greet you, it sucker punches you. A rooster screams like it's trying to exorcise the entire barn. Light filters through wooden slats, illuminating motes of hay dust and your own general filth. Your body has aged about 30 years overnight. Every joint creaks like a medieval door hinge. You try to stretch, but something pulls. Muscle? Nerve? Dignity? Hard to say. You are, at this point, a sack of bones held together by bread crust and regret. Today is not a fieldwork day, though. Not for everyone. You overhear snatches of conversation as the villagers gather, most of them spoken in dialects that resemble English the way a snake resembles a shoelace. But for what you can piece together, you're being pulled into something different, a full day of medieval chores. The kind they don't show in the fairy tales. Your first assignment? Water, as in go fetch some. Because here's the thing, medieval villages don't have taps. No faucets, no plumbing. Water doesn't come to you. You go to it, which often means a communal well or, if you're lucky, a nearby stream. Today, it's the latter. You're handed 2 wooden buckets attached to a yoke, a beam of wood designed to rest across your shoulders like an exercise in cruelty. The wood digs into your collarbone as you shuffle toward the stream with a few others. One girl, can't be older than 12, is balancing the buckets with an ease that makes you feel deeply unathletic. The stream isn't far, but the path is uneven, muddy, and full of surprises. Some organic, some suspiciously human. When you reach the water, it's questionable. a little murky, possibly home to a family of frogs. You lower the buckets, splash in some water, lift them, and nearly dislocate your spine. It's heavy, really heavy. You teeter on the way back, water sloshing with every step. By the time you return, half of it is gone. The villagers say nothing, but someone swaps your yoke out for a smaller one, clearly meant for children. So that's where you're at now. After water comes firewood, which means chopping. You've never held an axe before, and it shows. The tool is blunt, the handle worn smooth by hands far more competent than yours. A man with a bushy beard tries to demonstrate. A quick, practiced swing, a clean split of a log. Then he gestures to you. You miss. Not by much, but enough to leave a dent in the earth and a dent in your self-esteem. You try again, and again. Eventually, you do split one piece. It's not pretty. It takes 5 tries, but it counts. Your hands are now both raw and splintered. Your arms feel like boiled noodles. A cat watches you from a fence post with the smugness of a creature that knows you'd never survive in its world. By midday, you're reassigned, possibly out of pity, to help with food preparation. Inside a smoky hut, the women are baking. If you thought this might be your chance to rest, you were wrong. Grinding grain is brutal. The hand mill, 2 flat stones stacked and turned by sheer effort, is deceptively cruel. It takes forever to turn even a small handful of barley into coarse flour. You grind, and your arms scream. A mainstream historical fact? Flour was often full of grit from millstones, leading to widespread dental problems, even among the young. As your fingers throb from the endless cranking, a fringe tidbit creeps in your thoughts. Some wealthier folks added chalk or whiteners to their flour to make it look more refined. The poor, they got what they got, which often included insects and mystery pebbles. You help pat the flour into small cakes, watching as they're baked on a stone over open fire. It smells better than it tastes. When one is done, you're allowed a bite. It's chewy, bland, like edible dust. Still, you're grateful. By the time that chore's done, you've barely stopped moving. But it's not over. Someone sends you to the pig pens. Now, if you're imagining cute, pink cartoon pigs, please stop. These pigs are the stuff of legend. Bristled, muscular, vaguely sinister. One of them eyes you like it remembers a grudge you haven't even earned yet. Your task? Muck out the pen, which is a polite way of saying shovel pig poop. The stench is immediate. Thick, aggressive. It doesn't waft, it attacks. You gag more than once, earning a chuckle from a teenage boy who's already knee-deep in the slop, shoveling like it's no big deal. You try to match his rhythm, and within minutes, your boots are lost to the mud. You consider leaving them behind and joining the pigs. They at least seem happy. Eventually, mercifully, the work pauses. Someone calls for you to wash at the trough, which is exactly what it sounds like, a big wooden basin full of what used to be clean water. You splash your face, your arms. It helps, slightly. The smell, though, is permanent. You slump near a fence, trying to catch your breath. Everything hurts. Your lower back feels like it's plotting revenge. Your knees crack when you shift. And your hands? Blistered, bruised, and now caked in things you try not to identify. A boy sits beside you and shares a piece of hard cheese. It tastes like the inside of a drawer, but it's solid and it fills the gaps. You nod your thanks. He doesn't reply, just smiles with crooked teeth and tosses a stone at chicken. Misses. You watch the sky shift from gray to gold, the sun dipping, casting long shadows. It's beautiful, and somehow that makes it worse, because it's a reminder that all this labor, all this sweat and pain exists in a world that's stunning without ever being kind. As the evening sets in, someone assigns you one last task, helping patch a thatched roof. You climb a rickety ladder while clutching reeds and straw bundles. Up top, The wind is sharp, the roof slanted. You crawl along, wedging straw under tiles. Try not to look down. Historians still argue whether village labor was strictly divided by gender or more flexible during crisis periods. Judging by your own experience, desperation erases a lot of rules. You finish just before dusk, your fingers raw, your legs jelly. When you finally climb down, you feel like you've lived 3 lifetimes in one day. That night, you're offered a blanket, coarse wool, scratchy, but clean. A rare kindness. You wrap yourself tight and huddle into the hay. Sleep comes fast, and so does the realization. This was just an average day. And you, dear time traveler, are barely hanging on. Your body is officially in revolt. Waking up this morning is less of a gentle rise and more like dragging a sack of wet cement across a gravel road with your face. Your limbs ache in places you didn't even know had muscles. Your back has officially filed a complaint. Your feet? They're somewhere between blistered and betrayed. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the stench. You smell like you lost a fight with a pig, a haystack, and some questionable cheese. Hygiene, in case you hadn't noticed, isn't exactly a medieval priority. The village has a stream, yes, but you're not alone in using it. Livestock drink from it. People wash their clothes in it. Children pee in it. And yet, that same water might be your only chance at a rinse. So, dragging your half-broken body, you stumble to the water's edge. It's freezing. You splash it on your face and gasp like a Victorian heroine. A nearby woman dumps a bucket over her head, shivering but determined. She glances at you with a look that clearly translates to toughen up. You try to scrub yourself clean with a rag that might have once been white. The water makes your blisters sting. A layer of grime clings to you like a protective second skin. But hey, at least now you're damp and dirty. Progress? And now we come to one of the most humbling parts of your journey. Medieval hygiene and personal care. If you're expecting any kind of spa experience, go ahead and lower those expectations right into the manure pile. A mainstream historical fact. While the stereotype says medieval folks were filthy, many peasants did bathe when they could. Communal bathhouses existed in cities, and rural folks made do with rivers, lakes, and barrels. But soap? Luxury, often made with lion animal fat. It was harsh and rare for commoners. You get water and maybe a fistful of ash if you're lucky. Toothbrushes? Try a frayed twig. Toothpaste? Salt. Or crushed charcoal if you want that gritty, sandpaper feeling on your molars. The idea of minty freshness doesn't arrive for several more centuries, so your breath smells vaguely like last night's onion stew and despair. And let's talk about hair. Combs are shared. Lice? Oh, they're not pests. They're roommates. Some people shave their heads to avoid them. Others rub vinegar into their scalp. You settle for finger combing your tangled mess and pretending it's rustic. Your tunic, by now, could walk on its own. Washing clothes is a chore and a half. You haul your one spare outfit to the stream, scrub it with a rock like you've seen the others do, and watch the dirt cloud around you like a personal shame aura. You hang the tunic on a branch where it stiffens in the cold breeze. And then you wait, bare-legged, freezing, hoping the medieval sun works overtime today. Somewhere behind you, someone coughs. A harsh, racking cough that doesn't stop. You turn, and it's a man, bent over, pale, sweating in the morning chill. He spits something dark into the grass. And just like that, the other horror of medieval life hits you. Sickness is everywhere. There's no germ theory yet. People don't fully understand disease. Illness is often blamed on bad air, humors being out of balance, or even punishment from God. A runny nose might be the start of a fatal fever. That guy coughing near your laundry, he could have the plague. or tuberculosis, or any number of unnamed ailments that have no cure and are incredibly contagious. Historians still argue whether the Black Death's rapid spread was worsened more by urban crowding or rural poverty. Either way, wherever you are, it's not safe. A quirky tidbit: some people wore beak-like masks filled with herbs to ward off miasmas. That weird fashion choice wouldn't come until later plagues. But even now, folks walk around with pomanders, little bags of herbs or flowers, to keep the bad smells and spirits away. You see one tied to a woman's belt, a cloth bundle smelling faintly of lavender and resignation. Back in the village, you're handed a cloth to help clean a sick elder's bedding. You hesitate. The smell is overpowering, sour sweat, sickness, maybe death. The man mutters in his sleep. His skin is flushed and damp. You try not to breathe too deeply. There's no hospital, no antibiotics, no nurse swooping in with sanitized tools and a clipboard. There's only you, a dirty cloth, and vague instructions from the local wise woman who suggests a mixture of dried nettles and a prayer. That's medicine. It's hard to blame them. With so little understanding of biology, medieval folks turned to what they did know: herbs, superstition, and hope. Some cures worked: honey for wounds, garlic for infections. Others not so much, like applying crushed beetles or burying a rooster's foot near the doorway. You watch as someone burns dried rosemary in the sick room, waving the smoke around the doorway. A charm hangs from the rafters, bones and string and symbols that look suspiciously like a toddler's drawing. You don't ask. You just keep your head down and scrub the bedding. Later, you help boil water in a huge iron pot over the fire. It takes ages to heat, and by the time it's steaming, your face is flushed and your skin tingles from the smoke. You hand wash linens in it, careful not to scald yourself. You try to feel helpful, but mostly you feel in the way. In the background, that man is still coughing. You sit outside for air. A child runs by barefoot, giggling, hair full of knots, face smudged with ash. Another picks at a scab on his leg that's clearly infected, and no one seems alarmed, because this is normal. You get sick, you heal, or you don't. Life moves on. By evening, your nose is running. A tickle at the back of your throat makes you cough once, then twice. You lie down in the barn, pulling the itchy blanket close, and tell yourself it's nothing, just the chill, just the wind. Because the alternative? You don't want to think about that. You wake up shivering, not just the polite, gentle tremble, the kind of full-body quake that rattles your teeth and sends chills down to your medieval soul. Your blanket, which last night seemed merely itchy, now feels like it's made of frozen sandpaper. Every breath of air that seeps in through the barn slats feels like it's been personally chilled by some ancient frost god. And your throat? It's sore, raw, like you tried to gargle thorns in your sleep. Congratulations. You're now playing the "is it just a cold or the beginning of death" game that everyone in medieval Europe played at least once a month. Spoiler alert, there are no winners. You cough softly at first, then again, harder. The others stir. One man squints at you through the gloom and shifts away slightly. Subtle, but you catch it. It's the medieval version of someone spraying Lysol after you sneeze. You drag yourself outside, squinting at the sun. Morning again. Another day to be tested by a time period that very clearly wants you dead. You tell yourself to toughen up. It's probably just the cold air. Nothing more. Except you feel weak, sluggish, like your body is running on fumes and barley crumbs. Still, rest is a luxury, and you haven't earned it. Today, you're shadowing the village's healer. Not because you volunteered, don't flatter yourself, but because your obvious weakness makes you a liability in the fields and someone had to get you out of the way. So here you are, trailing a woman who looks equal parts grandmother and forest witch. She walks with purpose, her cloak frayed and decorated with what looks suspiciously like crow feathers. A pouch of dried herbs hangs from her belt. Her hands are cracked from decades of work and weather. But she moves quickly, purposefully. You have to jog to keep up, which doesn't help the dizziness creeping into your skull. Your first stop is a birth. Yep, you go from shoveling pig poop to the miracle of life in one hard left turn. Inside the cramped cottage, a woman lies sweating on a straw mattress. Her face is tight with pain, her legs trembling. A small group of women surround her, murmuring encouragement. The air is thick with heat, sweat, and tension. You stay near the door, try not to faint, or vomit, or both. A mainstream historical fact. Childbirth was one of the most dangerous events in a woman's life in the Middle Ages. No pain relief, no antiseptics, no surgical intervention beyond crude tools and sheer hope. Maternal mortality was terrifyingly common, and babies often didn't survive past infancy. As the labor intensifies, the healer prepares a tea brewed from raspberry leaves and nettles. You help crush the dried herbs with a mortar and pestle. Try to ignore the sounds behind you. Groans, cries, and a wet, tearing noise that sticks in your brain like a splinter. The baby comes. Eventually, the room shifts from tension to frantic motion. You glimpse it, small, slick, not yet crying. The healer clears its mouth with a cloth, rubs its back, and then, finally, a high-pitched wail. Everyone exhales. The mother sobs, equal parts joy and agony. But she's not out of danger. The healer inspects the afterbirth. She's looking for signs of retained placenta, infection, internal tearing. You're trying not to pass out into the fire pit. Eventually, you stumble outside. The air hits your face like a bucket of ice. You lean against the wall, panting, grateful to be away from the heat and the smells. You're rewarded with a different kind of errand, collecting leeches from the pond. Because nothing says self-care like a pouch of tiny bloodsuckers. The healer explains their use as you squelch through mud. Leeches were believed to balance the body's humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much of one, slap a leech on it. Got a fever? Leeches. Sore throat? Leeches. Gout, melancholy, bad dreams? You guessed it, leeches. A quirky tidbit: some particularly enthusiastic barber surgeons advertise the freshness of their leeches, like fish at a market. Live, plump, and ready to drain. You bring back a handful in a damp cloth, doing your best not to think about the squirming sensation in your palm. They're used on an older man with a swollen ankle. The healer applies them gently. He watches you with tired eyes and says nothing, just winces slightly as the leeches latch on. The healer also uses ointments: mushed comfrey root for bruises, honey for cuts, onion poultices for chest congestion. You help prepare them, crushing and stirring with hands that tremble just slightly. Whether from the illness or the horror, you're not sure. Historians still argue whether herbalists were more effective than the era's licensed doctors, many of whom relied on outdated Greco-Roman texts. But when you see the healer work, calm, sure, hands steady despite the chaos, you begin to believe in her. You spend the rest of the day carrying water for her, boiling cloth, gathering herbs. In between tasks, you cough. A lot. You try to hide it. No one says anything, but you catch the healer watching you, her brow slightly furrowed. By evening, she presses a warm drink into your hands. It smells sharp and earthy, thyme perhaps, or maybe mint and something more bitter. You sip. It burns a little on the way down. You ask if it will help. She just smiles and says it might, which in this century is practically a guarantee. That night, you sleep in her hut, alone, not because she's being generous, because she's quarantining you, just in case. Morning comes slowly in quarantine. There's no rooster here, No busy footsteps overhead or chatter from the others. Just the muted rustling of the wind through thatch and the occasional creak from the old wooden beams above your head. You're tucked into a pile of straw that's more sneeze trigger than mattress, wrapped in a woolen blanket that smells faintly of smoked herbs, sweat, and something vaguely medicinal, like if Vicks Vapor Rub had been invented by a druid. Your head pounds. Your limbs are heavier than ever, but at least the sore throat is easing up. Or maybe it's just that your standards have plummeted so far that only mildly dying feels like an upgrade. You sit up, slowly, and glance around the healer's hut. It's both cluttered and careful. Bundles of dried plants hang from the rafters: sage, mugwort, rosemary. Clay pots and wooden bowls crowd shelves and tables, each labeled with rough symbols carved into the side. A mortar and pestle rest in a stone groove in the wall, and near the door, a row of little wax scrolls dangle like charms. You don't touch anything. You learned your lesson with that beehive 2 villages ago. You're not exactly in prison here. There's no locked door, no guards. But when you peek outside, the healer is there, sitting on a log, skin wrinkled like an old apple, stitching something by hand. She looks up, eyes you carefully, and gestures for you to stay inside. Not unkindly, but firmly. You nod, shuffle back in. Your parole hearing will have to wait. A pot simmers over the fire. You ladle some out, a thin broth, flecked with wild onion and a floating root that resembles a shrunken thumb. It's salty, hot, and surprisingly comforting. You wonder how long you'll be stuck here. A day? 2? A week? The days blur, and even medieval isolation manages to feel like 14th century Wi-Fi downtime. To pass time, you start poking through the healer's materials, after she allows it, of course. You're now an unofficial apprentice. She shows you how to steep elderflower to reduce fevers, how to identify poisonous plants. She makes you repeat the warnings 3 times, and how to set broken fingers with splints made from willow and strips of soap bark. You practice knotting poultice wraps on a sack of grain, which she treats like a VIP patient. You flub the first few, accidentally tie one into a bow, and the second looks like it's wearing a scarf, but she corrects you patiently. You're grateful for the distraction, because even in a quiet hut, you hear the coughing from across the village. And once, just once, you hear bells. Low and steady. Not church bells. Plague bells. Carried by a man with a cart, shuffling down the far end of the village trail. You don't see him, but the sound cuts through you. A mainstream historical fact. During outbreaks of illness, plague walkers rang bells as they passed through towns and villages to warn of infection. Sometimes they collected the sick, other times the dead. Always cloaked, always feared. That low clang wasn't just sound, it was a reckoning. And here you are, fevered and waiting in a camelot hut, hoping your cough is nothing serious. Historians still argue whether quarantine practices like these, removing the sick from the general population, were widely implemented in rural communities or only in major port cities. But there's no debate that fear of contagion shaped life at every level. The fear that you might bring illness to your neighbors, or that they might bring it to you. And now you're wondering if the healer's kindness is really compassion or just preventative damage control. She gives you a salve for your chest, something between menthol and rotting pine needles. You smear it on under your tunic and immediately smell like a burning tree farm. But you breathe a little easier. At night, you dream of bells. You wake in a sweat, clutching the blanket, half expecting to see the cloaked cartman at the foot of your straw bed. But it's just the fire, just the hut, just you. By the 3rd day, the fever breaks. You're groggy but upright. You help boil water. You assist with a poultice for an old woman's swollen knee from a distance. You're even allowed outside the hut briefly to collect herbs, but she ties a bundle of mugwort around your neck just in case. The moment you return to the village is awkward. People look, a few nod. One man crosses himself. Children whisper. You're not exactly welcome back with a cake and balloons. More like a cautious side eye and a subtle widening of personal space. You help dig a new trench near the edge of the village for drainage. They say, but you've seen this before. It's the start of a mass grave. Just in case. You work quietly. Each shovelful of dirt is a prayer you don't know how to say. A quirky tidbit. In some communities, people believed sneezing expelled evil spirits, and you had to say God bless you to stop your soul from escaping through your nose. So when you sneeze from the mugwort hanging on your chest, you get not one, but 4 frantic blessings from a group of passing women. It's oddly comforting, like medieval wellness affirmations. By week's end, you feel almost normal again. Stronger, not spry, but at least upright, and only coughing once an hour. The healer gives you a small charm, braided red thread with a sprig of rosemary for protection. You accept it with a grateful nod and wear it tied to your belt. When you leave her hut for good, she doesn't say goodbye, just hands you a small pouch of dried herbs and turns back to her mortar. You pause, then shuffle off, trying to suppress a cough that refuses to completely let go. You may have survived this round, but in medieval times, recovery is never guaranteed. It's just a pause before the next test. You return to the village proper with a wheeze in your lungs and a newfound respect for fresh air. Though in truth, fresh is generous. The streets are still muddied with the leftovers of farm animals, chamber pot dumps, and whatever mystery stew someone dropped by accident last week. But to your post-sickened senses, it smells almost nostalgic, like you've been away at war and come home to the battlefield that raised you. Still, things feel different now. People eye you with an unspoken question. Are you really better? Or are you just the walking version of a bad omen? They don't say it out loud, of course. But in a world where illness can mean exile, or worse, you're walking a fine line between welcomed and watched. Even your cough, though softer now, draws wary glances. And when a mother pulls her toddler away from you a little too quickly, it stings more than you'd like to admit. No one wants to get near a body that might still be cursed. You try to make yourself useful. You shovel dung. Again, you help a boy unstick his foot from a swampy puddle. You nod politely to the alewife, even though she still squints at you like you're a haunted turnip. Slowly, the stares soften. You're back, mostly, until your next assignment hits. Hard, like a wooden bucket to the face. You're helping process a pig, as in the entire pig, from its last oink to its first appearance as smoked sausage. The villagers don't just eat meat here, they celebrate it. It's rare, a luxury for feasts, harvests, and weddings. But when a pig is butchered, no part is wasted. And today, you're learning exactly what that means. You're taken to the edge of the village, where a sturdy wooden table has been scrubbed with salt and good intentions, and a freshly killed pig lies cooling in the open air. Its eyes are still half-lidded, its legs still bent as if mid-run. One man sharpens a knife the size of short sword. Another boils a pot of water. The rest are laughing, already sharing sips of ale. You're handed a leather apron and a skinning knife. You'd say no, but that's not really an option. Not unless you want to be assigned back to plague leech duty. You take your position near the pig's haunches. The smell is raw, metallic. You're surprised at how warm everything still is. This isn't the neatly packaged meat you're used to. This is biology, undeniable and immediate. As you cut, slowly and with a hand that trembles more from horror than illness, you remember a mainstream historical fact. Medieval people prized nose-to-tail eating. Organs weren't just edible, they were delicacies. The liver, heart, kidneys, and even the bladder were either eaten, used in medicines, or stuffed for sausages. You watch as the intestines are removed, cleaned, and later inflated like balloons to check for holes. They'll be turned into sausage casings. Your job? Scrape fat from skin. Render it down later for lard. Your hands quickly become slick, and the knife threatens to slip with every movement. You gag only once, which, apparently, earns you silent respect. A fringe tidbit: pig bladders were sometimes dried and used as primitive footballs, or, if you're very unlucky, as makeshift condoms. You try not to think too hard about that, as one man jokingly tosses a bladder in your direction. You flinch. It lands at your feet with a wet plop. No thank you. After the butchering comes preservation. Salt. So much salt. Barrels of it. Every strip of meat is rubbed and packed to stave off rot. Some parts are smoked over the hearth for days, adding flavor and shelf life. Others are hung in a cool, shaded spot to cure. You help twist sausages, stuffing seasoned ground meat into cleaned intestines with your thumb, pushing and twisting in a rhythm that becomes hypnotic. There's laughter around you now. The villagers are warming up. Maybe it's the fire or the ale or the fact that your face is smeared with pig grease and no longer pale with plague. You're becoming one of them, bit by salty bit. Historians still argue whether meat consumption was more common among peasants than previously thought. While traditional views paint peasants as near vegetarians, some recent evidence suggests rural folk did eat meat more regularly, just in smaller amounts and heavily preserved. And now you know exactly how the sausage gets made. The day ends with a small feast, grilled liver, seasoned with herbs, and a few precious strips of bacon. You're offered some, and you hesitate. But your stomach growls, and your pride nods for you. You take a bite. It's greasy, rich, absolutely incredible. Probably your body screaming in protein-deprived joy. A mug of ale follows, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel almost happy, until you glance down and realize your hands are still stained with blood. Under your nails, in the creases of your fingers. You wash. Twice. It doesn't all come out. You sleep that night in a hayloft again, curled under a shared woolen blanket, with your belly full and your conscience only mildly disturbed. But you dream of pigs, and of intestines, and of that one sausage you tied too tightly that burst with a wet squelch. You're learning, all right, not just how to survive, but how to fit in, and it's dawning on you. Surviving medieval life isn't about getting through the tasks. It's about stomaching them. Literally. Sleep is different now. It's not restful exactly, but it's deep. Exhaustion seeps into your bones by sundown and doesn't let go until the faint gray light creeps into the barn again. No alarms, no blue screens, no morning coffee. Just the soft shifting of livestock below you and a rooster with zero understanding of personal boundaries crowing directly under your floorboard. You roll out of the hay like a lopsided loaf of bread and stretch. Your back cracks in 2 places. Or 3. You've lost count. It's either a good sign or a gentle medieval warning that your spine is now 32% straw. Breakfast is simple. A chunk of hard bread that may once have been soft during the reign of the previous king, dipped in yesterday's stew and chewed slowly to avoid snapping a molar. You tear off a bit with your teeth, muttering your new mantra, better than plague. Today, you're told, is your day to assist at the forge. Oh yes, the blacksmith's forge, the absolute crucible of medieval masculinity. It's hot, it's loud, it's where horseshoes are born, nails are hammered, and where every village boy dreams of going, until they realize they'll spend most of the day hauling coal and inhaling metal-flavored smoke. You arrive to the clanging of hammer on iron. The smith is already hard at work, sleeves rolled, muscles glistening with sweat and soot. He hands you a pair of heavy leather gloves, a soot-smeared apron, and a pair of tongs almost as long as your arm. You're not here to craft swords. You're here to not pass out. Your job starts with the bellows. Simple, right? Just pump air into the fire. Except these bellows are enormous, creaky, and determined to pinch your fingers. You heave them up and down in rhythm, feeding the flames with gusts of air that make the coals glow an angry orange. The heat slaps your face like a wet towel every time. Within 20 minutes, you are drenched. In sweat, in soot, in regret. You finally understand a mainstream historical fact. Medieval forges could reach temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Not because they had magical technology, but because humans like you were there pumping the bellows, hauling fuel, and occasionally singeing their eyebrows. You assist with heating a rod of iron. It starts black, then red, then orange, and finally white hot. The smith pulls it from the fire and begins hammering with brutal grace. Sparks fly, the clang echoes in your chest, and the scent of scorched metal lingers in your nostrils like an old grudge. Your hands tremble with every strike. Even watching feels like a workout. You hold tools. You hand over nails. You sweep up bits of slag and ash. Try not to breathe too deeply. You sneeze once and create a miniature ash cloud. The smith chuckles. It's the most affection you've gotten in hours. Midday comes, and you take a break near the river. You strip off your outer layers, splash cold water on your face, and try to remember what oxygen tastes like. Your muscles ache, and your hands are blistered in places you didn't know had skin. You now have forge hands. Congratulations. That's one blister closer to fitting in. Back at the smithy, the smith is fitting shoes onto a horse. You're asked to hold the animal's flank gently but firmly. You do. The horse snorts, and you swear it's judging you. The smith explains that a good horseshoe can mean the difference between a successful harvest and a dead animal. There's precision here, flattening the iron just right, curving it with careful taps, punching nail holes before the metal cools. It's a craft, and a lifeline, a quirky tidbit. Some horseshoes were nailed on with 7 nails, one for each day of the week, said to bring luck. Superstition met practicality everywhere. You help polish finished nails and stack them in a bin. Your shirt is soaked through. You've got an actual soot mustache. And you're starting to understand why blacksmiths were respected like demigods in these communities. They made everything, from hinges to weapons, from cooking hooks to farming tools. And sometimes they were even thought to possess magical properties, able to bend not just metal, but fate itself. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were genuinely seen as mystical figures or just benefited from the fact that they were incredibly handy during crop failures and war. Either way, nobody messed with the guy who could make a broadsword and fix your oven. Later in the day, the smith lets you try shaping a simple hook. You grip the glowing rod with tongs, place it on the anvil, and strike. Your first hit glances off and nearly smashes your foot. Your second is better. By the fourth, you manage to bend the metal with some shape resembling a hook or a very depressed letter J. He nods, grunts. Not awful. You've just received the medieval equivalent of a gold star. As the sun starts to dip, the smith begins banking the coals, covering them with ash to smother the fire, but keep embers alive for morning. You help pack up tools, brush the floor, and even manage a conversation about iron blossom, a poetic term for sparks flying off a blade. He says it like it's obvious. You try to look wise. You trudge back to the barn with legs that feel like melted butter and arms that hum with fatigue. Every part of you aches. Even your earlobes feel like they've been hammered on an anvil. But something shifts inside you. You made a hook. You survived the fire. You didn't cry when the forge smoke got in your eyes. Tonight, dinner is coarse bread and a strip of salted meat. You eat slowly, grateful, not just for the food, but for the strange satisfaction of earning it with your own sore hands. And you realize you might just be adjusting, which is great, Because tomorrow you're headed to church. You step toward the church, the village's stone beacon of faith and fear, its heavy wooden doors worn smooth by generations of hands, some seeking solace, others just out of habit. You probably don't realize yet how central this place is, not just as a house of worship, but as the village's social media, courthouse, and gossip hub all rolled into one. The air feels thick as you approach, not just with incense, but with expectation. The scent of beeswax candles, musty parchments, and a faint undercurrent of damp stone greets you like an old friend who's slightly out of breath. Inside, light filters through stained glass windows, splashing colors across faces and wooden pews like a kaleidoscope gone slightly sideways. The choir, mostly old men with impressive noses, mumbles hymns in Latin, the language you barely understand but nod along to anyway. Their voices blend with the low hum of whispered prayers and the occasional cough. Medieval church, after all. You find a spot near the back, careful not to block anyone's view or their chance for a nap. The priest, robed in flowing fabric that seems far too fancy for a village of mud and manure, stands at the altar, intoning in a voice that's part sermon, part stand-up routine. He warns of sin, plague, and the devil's temptations with such fervor you half expect thunder to crack through the ceiling. You join the chorus of Amen, unsure if you're really affirming anything, or just try to survive another hour without falling asleep. The church isn't just about the soul, though. It's about power. The priest holds sway over the villagers' daily lives, deciding who gets a blessing, who's scolded for transgressions, and sometimes even who's shunned. You overhear whispers about a woman accused of witchcraft, a fate often sealed not with evidence, but with suspicion and a dash of jealousy. A mainstream historical fact? The medieval church was a dominant institution in everyday life, influencing everything from education to law to healthcare. Priests often doubled as doctors, scribes, and counselors, wielding immense authority. After the service, the churchyard buzzes with villagers. Market stalls pop up along the cobblestones, herbs, cheeses, trinkets, and rumors. You watch an elderly man barter fiercely over a bundle of garlic, said to ward off evil spirits, while children dart between legs chasing a scruffy dog. You realize that church is less a place of quiet reflection and more the village's busiest crossroads. Historians still argue whether the medieval church's role was more oppressive or protective in rural communities, given its blend of spiritual guidance and control. You notice a woman clutching a small wooden cross, her eyes darting nervously. You remember the healer's charm and wonder how many layers of protection people need to feel safe. Later, you're pulled into a discussion about a coming festival, Saints' Day. There will be food, music, and dancing, a rare break from the endless grind. You're invited almost hesitantly, like a newcomer allowed to the town's innermost circle. You accept. On your way home, you pass a group of children playing a game that looks a lot like early hopscotch, their laughter echoing through the narrow streets. It hits you that despite the harshness, life pulses vibrantly here. Back at the barn, you curl into your straw bed, your mind buzzing with prayers, politics, and the promise of celebration. You clutch the red thread charm close, feeling its rough braid against your palm. Tomorrow, you'll learn the steps to dance. Tonight, you rest in the shadow of the church's stained glass light, where faith and fear are intertwined like the colors on the walls. Dawn breaks with a chill that nips at your skin through the thin layers you call clothing. You trudge out of the barn, blinking against the gray light, and head toward the village square, where preparations for the Saints' Day festival are already underway. The atmosphere is a strange blend of reverence and reckless joy, an escape from daily toil, if only for a few hours. The square is a whirlwind of activity. Colorful banners flap in the breeze. Wooden tables groan under piles of bread, cheese, and fruit, and musicians tune lutes and drums. The smell of roasting meat and sweet pastries wraps around you like a warm cloak, temporarily banishing memories of hard bread and salted pork. You're given a simple but important role: help string lanterns and weave garlands of flowers and herbs. The villagers work together with a joyful abandon that feels foreign yet inviting. You fumble with the delicate stems, your fingers clumsy, but the villagers smile patiently. As you work, an elder explains the festival's meaning. Saints' Day is a celebration of protection against plagues, bad harvests, and, most importantly, the unpredictable whims of life. The saint, a figure you vaguely recall from church sermons, is said to watch over the village, granting favors to those who honor him. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Medieval festivals often coincided with religious holidays and marked the turning points of agricultural seasons, blending sacred and secular traditions. You watch as children perform simple dances, their feet stomping rhythms that seem to echo ancient beats. Some wear masks shaped like animals, a nod to older pagan customs quietly folded into Christian rites. The dance, you learn, is more than entertainment. It's a ritual believed to ensure fertility of the land and people. Historians still argue whether these pagan elements were genuine survival of ancient beliefs or clever adaptations by the church to keep villagers engaged and obedient. Your turn to join the dance arrives. You're paired with a local girl named Elswith, who's quick to laugh and even quicker to correct your awkward steps. She tells you the dance is about connection between earth, community, and the unseen forces guarding them. The music swells, and you step awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. The pounding drums feel like the heartbeat of the village itself. You can almost forget how out of place you feel. Halfway through, someone bursts the bubble by accidentally stepping on your foot. You yelp, Elswith laughs, and the dance stumbles but continues. After the dancing, there's a feast. You sit on a wooden bench, sharing a hearty stew thick with root vegetables and chunks of meat. You drink watered ale, which tastes surprisingly sweet, and feel a contentment you haven't known in days. Yet, beneath the celebration, you sense the village's unspoken fears, the ever-present threat of famine, disease, and the cruelty of weather. The feast is as much a prayer as it is a party. As twilight falls, torches flicker to life, casting long shadows. The villagers gather around a bonfire, singing songs that tell of heroes, gods, and ancient beasts. The flames crackle, sending sparks like fireflies into the night sky. You feel yourself relaxing into the moment, letting the warmth and music soothe your weary body. The worries of the day, of the plague, and the pig's intestines fade just enough to let you dream. And for the first time in a long while, you almost believe you could survive this strange, harsh world. Morning comes wrapped in mist, the village still murmuring with the aftermath of the festival. You drag yourself from the straw bed, muscles sore but spirit oddly buoyed. Today, you are to learn the craft of farming, the backbone of medieval life, and, spoiler alert, one of the hardest jobs imaginable. The fields stretch out before you like an endless patchwork quilt, mottled green and brown, under a sky that's stubbornly gray. The soil smells damp and alive, a scent both fresh and foreboding. Your guide is a grizzled farmer named Bram, whose hands look like they've been carved from old oak and whose voice carries the wisdom of 100 seasons. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. Farming is a fight, he says, against earth, weather, and time. You grab a wooden plow, heavier than you expected, and try not to grimace as Bram yanks the reins of the oxen. The beasts snort impatiently, aware that you're not quite up to speed. As you push into the soil, your arms tremble and your legs threaten mutiny. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval agriculture was labor-intensive and relied heavily on animal power, but the tools were crude compared to today's machines. Efficiency was low, so every muscle mattered. Bram explains crop rotation, the clever medieval trick to keep the soil fertile. You nod along, pretending to understand the difference between legumes and fallow fields, all while trying not to trip over your own feet. Suddenly, a curious interruption. Bram pulls out a handful of seeds and sprinkles them over a patch of earth. "These are beans," he says. "They fix nitrogen in the soil, making it rich for the next crop." You think it's kind of miraculous, like nature's own fertilizer factory. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants fully grasped the science behind crop rotation or simply followed tradition passed down through generations. Either way, it saved lives. You spend the morning planting, weeding, and hauling buckets of water from the well. Your hands blister again, this time with the added insult of thorny weeds and rough hemp rope. By midday, the sun breaks through the clouds, and you're soaked in sweat. The smell of earth, sweat, and animals fills your nostrils. A bouquet that feels both exhausting and strangely grounding. As you pause, Bram tells stories of the land. How a bad harvest could mean starvation. How a good one could bring feasts and hope. He mentions superstitions too, like hanging garlic at the barn door to keep evil spirits, and sometimes just the occasional rat, away. You can't help but think that medieval life was a delicate balance between brute labor and quiet superstition. In the afternoon, you try your hand at milking a goat, a task requiring patience and a surprisingly delicate touch. The goat looks at you with what you swear is judgment, and you fumble until you finally produce a small stream of milk, which Bram nods at approvingly. You learn that dairy products were precious calories, but also risky due to lack of refrigeration. Spoiled milk could lead to illness, so timing was everything. As you trudge back toward the village, muscles aching and clothes stained with dirt, you realize farming is less about romance and more about relentless endurance. Yet, Bram smiles as he claps you on the back. "You've got spirit," he says. "That's half the battle." You think maybe he's right. Tonight, your bed of straw feels like a throne, worn but earned. The next morning, your legs still stiff from yesterday's farming marathon. You're tasked with a different kind of work, tending to the village animals. It sounds easier until you realize that goats, pigs, and chickens are less like cuddly pets and more like unpredictable, messy little disasters with hooves and beaks. You begin with the pigs, which are probably the messiest creatures you'll ever meet, unless you count the mud in your boots and the smell that seems to cling to every corner of the pen like a stubborn curse. Feeding the pigs involves lugging buckets of kitchen scraps, root vegetables, and stale bread. Though calling it food might be generous. The pigs snort and shove each other, greedily gobbling anything edible, including the occasional nail or twig that somehow makes it into their trough. You recall a historical fact. Pigs were incredibly valuable in medieval villages because they could convert waste into meat and required less care than other livestock, making them the unsung heroes of survival. A quirky tidbit. Medieval pig herders often used pigs to root out truffles and other underground delicacies, proving that even back then, people had a nose for luxury. You notice the pig's behavior changes when someone throws down a handful of acorns or apples, delicacies to them. Their eyes light up, and they seem almost joyful, which feels strange given their usual grunting chaos. As you move on to the chickens, you're greeted with a chorus of clucks, squawks, and the occasional flurry of feathers. Catching them proves more difficult than anticipated. One particularly feisty hen dodges your grasp with ninja-like moves, leaving you breathless and covered in dirt. You learn that eggs were precious protein, but gathering them was a race against foxes and bad weather. The best hens were fiercely protected, and sometimes superstitiously regarded as a sign of luck or fertility. Historians still debate whether medieval villagers truly understood animal husbandry science or relied mostly on trial, error, and folklore to care for their animals. The goats, meanwhile, are aloof and suspicious, with eyes that seem to size you up before allowing a tentative pet. You help milk one, the warm liquid dripping into a wooden bucket. The milk will be used for cheese, a staple that could last through winter when fresh food was scarce. By midday, the sun has climbed high, and you're coated in grime and smelling distinctly of barnyard. Your hands are scratched and sticky, but there's a quiet satisfaction in having helped sustain life, not just survive it. A village woman stops by, offering a nod and a small loaf of bread, her way of saying thanks, the medieval equivalent of a thumbs up. As the day winds down, you realize animals aren't just creatures to be managed. They're companions, workmates, and symbols of hope in this hard world. When you finally return to your straw bed, exhausted but oddly content, you reflect on the tangled dance between humans and animals. A relationship as old as time, but never simple. And you can't help but wonder what tomorrow's challenge will throw at you next. You wake to the rhythmic clang of the village blacksmith's hammer, echoing like the heartbeat of this medieval world. Today, your task is to spend time in the forge, a place of heat, sparks, and smoke, where metal meets fire to be transformed into tools, weapons, and sometimes pure magic. The air here hits you first, thick with soot, sharp with hot metal, and faintly metallic, like an invisible storm brewing. You find the blacksmith, a burly man named Joran, standing shirtless, his skin gleaming with sweat and smeared with grime. His arms move with practiced ease, each strike of the hammer sending a shower of orange sparks flying, lighting up the dim workshop like a mini fireworks show. You're handed a pair of heavy leather gloves and a simple hammer, feeling immediately like you're holding a rock instead of a tool. Joran chuckles at your hesitation. This is work, he says, but it's also art and survival. A mainstream historical fact here is that blacksmiths were essential in medieval villages, crafting everything from horseshoes to weapons to cooking pots. Without them, life would grind to a halt. As you try your hand at hammering a heated iron rod on the anvil, you discover it's less about brute force and more about rhythm and timing. You quickly learn that metal must be hot enough to bend, but not so hot that it melts away. The blacksmith's work is a delicate dance with fire. You watch as Joran shows you how to quench red-hot iron in water, causing a hiss and cloud of steam. This sudden cooling hardens the metal, but also makes it brittle, so it must be tempered carefully, a process still debated among scholars for its exact medieval techniques. A quirky tidbit: medieval blacksmiths sometimes inscribed symbols or initials on their work, not just for pride, but as a way to ward off evil spirits believed to inhabit objects. While you hammer, Joran tells stories of village life, the wars, the plagues, and how the blacksmith trade was sometimes seen as a kind of magic, a power both respected and feared. You note how the forge's constant heat and noise make it easy to lose track of time, a place where hours slip away amid fire and sweat. By late afternoon, your arms ache and your face is streaked with soot, but there's a sense of accomplishment in having shaped raw metal into something useful. You leave the forge smelling of smoke and iron, the image of flying sparks burned into your memory. This is a place where survival is forged, quite literally one strike at a time. As twilight falls, you think back to the pig's muddy pen and the church's stained glass. Life in this village is stitched together with fire, earth, and faith, each day a challenge to endure and adapt. And somehow, you're starting to see how it all fits. You awaken to a morning punctuated by the distant crow of a rooster and the clatter of wooden wheels on cobblestones. Today's challenge is to navigate the village marketplace, the vibrant, chaotic heart of medieval commerce, where bartering rules, rumors fly, and survival skills get tested in new ways. The market square buzzes with life as you step into the swirl of vendors, customers, and opportunists hawking everything from dried fish to woven baskets. The smells hit you immediately. A mix of fresh bread, sweaty bodies, spices, and the unmistakable stench of livestock pens nearby. Your task is simple. Attempt to buy a few basic items with the limited coins you've managed to scrounge. Easier said than done. Coins are rare and often clipped or counterfeit, so you quickly learn that trust and reputation weigh heavier than silver. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval marketplaces were the primary source of goods not produced locally, bringing in spices from faraway lands and enabling peasants to trade their wares. However, currency was scarce and bartering remained common. You haggling over a bundle of wool, a crucial material for clothing, draws attention from a sharp-eyed merchant woman. She offers you a deal, but not without a warning. Watch the coins wait, or you'll walk home with nothing but regrets. You feel like you're in a medieval episode of Survivor. A quirky tidbit. Some market vendors employed market criers who would loudly announce prices and gossip, doubling as the town's early form of social media. As you move through the stalls, you overhear snippets of conversation. Talk of an approaching lord's visit, a mysterious illness spreading in a nearby village, and a brewer bragging about a new recipe that might just be the cure for a bad day. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were more centers of community bonding or hotbeds of exploitation and corruption. You try your hand at bartering, offering a basket of eggs for some salted fish. The merchant smiles, shaking her head. Fair trade, but you're green, she says kindly. Come back with better coin next time. By mid-afternoon, you're heavier with goods, but lighter in coin, and your feet ache from the constant jostle of the crowd. Despite the hardships, there's a pulsating energy to the market, a reminder that life, even in medieval times, had its moments of hustle and excitement. You leave the square with a small sack of provisions and a head full of new knowledge. Survival is as much about wit and charm as it is about strength and labor. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the marketplace stalls as villagers pack up for the day. You feel the weight of both the goods in your sack and the lessons you're slowly accumulating. Tonight, as you settle into your straw bed, you realize the medieval world is a tangled web of challenges. Each day, a balancing act between danger, hope, and the simple desire to keep going. Morning brings the steady drip of rain against your wooden shutter, a persistent reminder that weather is not just a backdrop, but a ruthless player in medieval survival. Today, you accompany the village healer, an old woman named Morwan, who blends herbal wisdom with a dash of superstition to keep the sick alive and the healthy from falling prey. Morwan's cottage smells of dried herbs, smoke, and something faintly metallic, maybe a hint of blood. The walls are lined with bundles of plants, lavender, rosemary, and something you later learn is yarrow, used for wounds. You follow her as she prepares poultices and brews teas, explaining which herbs treat which ailments. Fever, she says, calls for willow bark, but sometimes you need a prayer too. Her voice carries a blend of certainty and weariness, as if the weight of countless lives rests on her weathered shoulders. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval healers were often women skilled in herbal medicine. though their work was shadowed by church authorities suspicious of witchcraft. You watch as Morwen visits a sick child, rubbing a cooling salve on the child's forehead and whispering prayers. The child's eyes flicker with feverish hope. You notice a strange charm tied to the cradle, a small pouch of garlic and salt meant to ward off evil spirits believed to cause illness. A quirky tidbit. Some medieval remedies involve crocodile dung as a sunscreen or treatment. A bizarre and somewhat questionable practice that reflects the blend of fact, folklore, and desperation in medieval medicine. Historians still argue whether medieval healing was more science or superstition, a mix of observation and magical thinking that often blur the lines. You help Morwen gather herbs in the damp forest, learning to identify plants by scent and leaf shape. The ground squelches beneath your boots, and the air is thick with the scent of moss and earth, a sensory world far removed from your modern comforts. Back in the cottage, Morwen tells you about the dangers of plague and how villagers try to protect themselves, avoiding strangers, burning incense, and sometimes isolating the sick in makeshift huts outside the village. You feel a shiver, remembering your earlier encounter with the pig intestines and the grim realities that lurk beneath daily life. As dusk falls, Morwen shares stories of saints and miracles, blending faith and healing in a way that feels both comforting and fragile. You leave the cottage with a newfound respect for the quiet battles fought with herbs, prayers, and hope. That night, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, you wonder if sheer determination and a pinch of luck are the best medicine of all. You awake to the unmistakable chill of a morning heavy with fog, a reminder that medieval life didn't offer much respite from the elements. Today, you're tasked with a rite both sacred and social, attending a village church service. You trudge toward the modest stone building at the heart of the village, its spires scraping the gray sky like a bony finger. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of candle wax, incense, and the faintest hint of damp stone. Flickering light plays over carved wooden pews and faded frescoes depicting saints with eyes that seem to follow you around the room. The quiet hum of whispered prayers and rustling robes fills the space, punctuated by the deep voice of the priest intoning Latin chants. You take your place among the villagers, a motley collection of faces, some solemn, others distracted, a few barely hiding yawns. Religion here isn't just about faith. It's a cornerstone of community life, a rare source of comfort and order in an unpredictable world. A historical fact to keep in mind. The medieval church wielded immense power, influencing everything from politics to daily routines, and attendance was often mandatory. During the service, you learn about the sacraments, the rituals that mark life's milestones, and the concept of penance, a medieval system for atoning sins that could include fasting, prayer, or even public humiliation. A quirky tidbit. Medieval sermons often included vivid, sometimes terrifying imagery of hell. Think fire, brimstone, and grotesque demons. A kind of spiritual shock therapy meant to keep parishioners in line. Historians still argue whether these fiery sermons genuinely inspired faith or mostly instilled fear and obedience. After the service, you mingle with villagers exchanging gossip and news, realizing the church is as much a social hub as a spiritual one. People trade information about crop yields, marriages, and the latest rumors from the Lord's Manor. You notice the stained glass windows casting colorful patterns on the worn stone floor, a rare splash of beauty in a harsh world. As the day progresses, you reflect on how religion shaped every aspect of medieval life, from the calendar marked by holy days to the moral codes governing behavior. The church's influence is vast and sometimes oppressive, but also a source of hope and community that might just help you survive this relentless medieval reality. You leave the church feeling both humbled and overwhelmed, aware that faith here is not just belief, it's a lifeline. The sun rises weak and watery, barely piercing the morning fog, as you prepare for one of the most challenging and dangerous medieval tasks, fetching water from the village well. It sounds simple, but in a time before plumbing, water meant life or death, and you quickly realize the sheer effort and risk involved. The wells stand in the center of the village, a stone cylinder wrapped in iron chains, with a wooden bucket attached to a rope. You grasp the handle and begin to lower the bucket into the dark depths, the creaking rope echoing in the chilly air. Pulling it up, heavy with water, requires more strength than you expected, and you feel the bucket's weight pulling at your arms and back. A mainstream historical fact: wells were often communal and a vital lifeline, but they could also be sources of disease when contaminated. Access to clean water was a constant concern. You notice the villagers exchanging wary glances near the well, as rumors of contamination spread fear. After all, a single bad batch of water could trigger an outbreak of dysentery or worse. A quirky tidbit: in some villages, well diggers would sprinkle coins or charms into the water to appease spirits believed to guard the water source, a mix of superstition and desperation. Historians still debate how medieval communities managed sanitation and water safety, with evidence suggesting a patchwork of practices and varying success. Carrying your bucket back to your small hut, you feel the cold water sloshing, a fleeting taste of modern convenience suddenly precious. Inside, you use a crude clay pot to boil water, a practice that's not always common but can prevent illness if done right. The thought of waterborne diseases lurking invisibly adds a layer of unease to this mundane chore. As you look out over the village, you realize that this daily trek to the well is more than a chore. It's a ritual of survival, a small battle against nature and neglect. The sun climbs higher, and you're dripping with sweat despite the chill, your hands rough and cracked from rope burns. Later, you observe children playing near the water troughs, their laughter a stark contrast to the harsh reality of fetching and protecting water. You think about how something as simple as water, so easy to take for granted today, was once a precious and precarious resource that could mean the difference between life and death. That night, the image of the well's dark depths stays with you, a reminder that even the most basic needs in medieval times were hard-won. The day greets you with a sharp chill that cuts through your worn cloak, and you soon realize that winter's grip is tightening, a season where medieval life feels like a constant test of endurance. Your challenge today is to prepare the village for the cold months ahead, a task filled with urgency, sweat, and the ever-looming threat of scarcity. You join the villagers in chopping wood, stacking logs with a precision born from necessity. The pile grows steadily, a fortress of warmth against long nights. Each swing of the axe sends with chips flying, and your muscles scream in protest, a far cry from any gym workout you've ever attempted. A historical fact: firewood was the primary heating and cooking source, and its shortage during winter could be catastrophic, forcing some to burn furniture, shoes, or even bones. You help haul bundles of dried herbs and stored grains into the communal cellar, the cool air inside filled with the musky scent of stored food and stone. The cellar's dampness clings to your clothes, but the cool temperature preserves the harvest, which is the village's lifeline during months of frost and snow. A quirky tidbit: some medieval families believed hanging garlic and onions in their homes during winter not only warded off evil spirits, but also helped keep away illnesses. Historians still debate how effective these superstitions were in improving health, or simply reflecting the human need for control in unpredictable times. As you work, a village elder shares tales of winters past, of frozen rivers, famine, and the communal effort needed to survive. These stories sound almost mythical, like warnings etched into the collective memory. Outside, you watch smoke curling from chimneys, each a small beacon of warmth against the gray sky. The village feels quieter now, as if holding its breath for the long season ahead. You notice the children's faces flushed from cold and excitement as they play near the snow's edge, their laughter a fragile shield against winter's harshness. Later, as you stoke the fire in your hut, you savor the rare luxury of warmth, feeling it seep into your chilled bones. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, a reminder that even in the coldest times, light and life endure. Preparing for winter isn't just about survival. It's about hope, community, and the stubborn refusal to yield to the darkness. As night falls, you tuck yourself under your thin blanket, grateful for the fire's glow and the hard-won knowledge that this world demands resilience, day after day. The morning light filters softly through your hut's tiny window, dust motes dancing lazily in the cool air. You realize this is the final stretch of your medieval trial, a moment to reflect on the relentless, unvarnished reality you've been living. Today, your task is to prepare for the inevitable, death and the customs that surround it. You follow the village gravedigger, a silent figure whose weathered hands have long known the weight of mortality. The graveyard lies just beyond the churchyard, a patch of earth marked by crooked wooden crosses and sun-bleached stones. The air carries a solemn hush, punctuated by the distant tolling of a bell. A mainstream historical fact, death was a constant presence in medieval life, with average life expectancy hovering around 30 to 40 years and high infant mortality rates. Burial rites were crucial, blending religion, superstition, and community ritual. You watch as the gravedigger prepares a shallow grave, carefully marking its boundaries. Villagers gather quietly nearby, some clutching rosaries, others wiping tears or staring into the cold ground. A quirky tidbit. In some regions, people placed coins on the eyes of the deceased to pay the ferryman in the afterlife, echoing ancient beliefs that survived deep into medieval times. Historians still argue how much these rituals offered real comfort versus simply reinforcing social order and religious control. You notice the mixture of fear and reverence in the crowd, a powerful reminder that death is both an end and a deeply communal experience here. As the body is lowered, prayers rise in a lilting chorus, and you feel the weight of generations held in this small patch of earth. Later, you help clean and prepare the churchyard, noting how graves sometimes bear simple inscriptions, a few adorned with carved symbols meant to protect the soul's journey. The day wanes as you think about the cycle of life and death, the fragile thread that binds everyone, from lord to peasant, in this harsh world. You feel a strange kinship with the village, this place where survival is a daily negotiation with nature, fate, and faith. As twilight deepens, you lie down once more on your straw mattress, the muffled sounds of the village night wrapping around you like a slow, steady heartbeat. You realize that, though you may not last a day in medieval times, the human spirit, tenacious, weary, hopeful, endures far beyond the struggles. The world you've stepped into is far from gentle, full of cold, hunger, pain, and ceaseless toil. Yet within that harshness lives a strange beauty. The crackling of firewood in the dark, the rough laughter of neighbors, the steady rhythm of seasons that never fail to turn. You've walked the paths of peasants and smiths, felt the sting of wind and the weight of water, shared the quiet prayers of the sick and the final farewells of the lost. Now, as you lie here, let the echoes of that world fade softly into your dreams. Imagine the flicker of candlelight dancing across stone walls, the gentle murmur of a village settling into night, and the quiet resilience that keeps the human story moving forward. Rest easy, knowing that though you wouldn't last a day in medieval times, you've survived the journey with your spirit intact. Good night and sweet dreams.